Well, didn't Detective Al Hansby extract a confession from Dennis DeShane?
Well, at the trial, Detective Hensby was asked what DeShane had said to him, and he claimed that DeShane said, "It must have been somebody inside me doing it." And this was so important that Prosecutor Wright had Hensby repeat that 4 times, and Wright told him, "Read from your notes." And Hensby, presumably reading from his notes, read, "It must have been somebody inside me made me do it." Well, after the legislature opened the Attorney General's files, one of the things that they didn't give us was Detective Hensby's notes. So we had a lawsuit, went to Superior Court, said let's have the rest of it. And we got Detective Hensby's notes. And his notes of that incident, which show the time, quote Dennis as making all kinds of exculpatory statements. "I didn't do it, I'm not guilty," that type of thing. There's nothing in his notes about somebody inside me made me do it. None of the quotes that he claimed under oath that he was reading from his notes are there.
Well, a lot has happened in the past, but just what's happening with this case today?
It seems that with all the fuss raised by trial and error folks and other citizens about questions in this case, Attorney General Stephen Rowe appointed a commission of 3 men, he called them 3 distinguished lawyers, to examine the case and offer an opinion as to whether there had been anything wrong done. And the commission of 3 distinguished lawyers took 2 years, and a couple months ago they came out with a report that said they had examined everything and spoken to the implicated officials, and they were satisfied there was no misconduct in this case. They didn't say that the officials hadn't told false things. They didn't say that the officials hadn't concealed evidence. They didn't say that the officials suppressed evidence. They just said that we don't believe there was any misconduct. So we got kind of curious as to how they came to that conclusion, and we filed a freedom of access request asking them for their file on it, and they didn't answer. It's as if they fell off the end of the earth. They just didn't answer at all. So I went to Superior Court and filed a lawsuit, and finally I got an answer. They sent a lawyer named Seth Harlow out of Bangor, and he has gone to court and ignored the question of how they came to their decision. His only motion to the court was requesting the judge to dismiss the case on technical procedural grounds, that I didn't file it the right day or something. And that's where it stands now. Presumably the judge will have a hearing on this matter.
These 3 distinguished jurists never spoke with Dennis's lawyers while they're doing this lengthy investigation. They did no due process. They held no hearings. They did not hold a news conference when they came up with this report, or when they made it public. And they took no questions. And if that were not disturbing enough, what's even more disturbing to me is the fact that the media and the press in this state just took that at face value. If you heard the news that night, they said that this independent commission had come up and issued this report and said that there were no problems with the prosecution or the police work in this case. When the new edition of Human Sacrifice came out, we sent copies to newspapers to see if they would want to review it. Unfortunately, none of them did. But the Courier-Gazette in Rockland actually explained why they were not going to review it, because they said this is a book that purports, this is actually written by the editor, Stephen Betts. He said this is a book that purports to be non-fiction, but it's fiction. Now this is curious because Jim Moore has offered a $1,000 reward for anyone that can come up with factual errors related to the case in Human Sacrifice. And I think that offer has been on the table for 7 months. One would think that maybe Mr. Betts would like to claim that money, but Jim still has his money.
Well, the newspapers may not have done a particularly good job of holding that up for any sort of scrutiny. This is the commission's report. I do remember seeing a lot of letters to the editor. The word whitewash seemed to appear in many letters, and I can understand after reading the commission's report why that would be the case.
A report that was commissioned by the state to look into the initial testing of the DNA. And basically what the report said was that the doctor who had done this test was a leading doctor, and that the test was completely on the up and up. And this report was never made public. It was filed, and it was in the secret documents which the legislature finally opened. The only reason we know about it is because Jim Moore spent hours combing through those records, and he found it. And I think the wording in the report, the commission report, was that it had been made available to the other side, so therefore in the end it did not concern them. Well, it was only made available because the legislature had to open the files and Jim Moore had to find it.
One has to wonder also just about the competence of the report or the commissioners. If you read it carefully, it's only 3 pages long. You discover that they can't even spell Dennis DeShane's name correctly, nor that of one of the assistant attorney generals, which they're quoting. It makes me wonder if they even proofread it, or more seriously, how closely they looked at the allegations which they were commissioned to investigate.
I guess that just about concludes everything. I'd like to thank Jim, Bill, Steve, and Bernie for enlightening us with this information that if you just know what you know from the newspapers and television, you certainly don't have a lot of information correct. You can also learn more about this if you were to pick up a copy of Human Sacrifice on the Altar of Injustice. And it was written by ATF agent James P. Moore. And of course we spoke with Jim here. You can either pick a copy of that book up in your bookstore, order it online, or you can even read it online, and I'll give you the address underneath the screen a little later, how you can read that book online, and it won't even cost you a cent to read it on. You can't take it, but you can read it. Since you heard a little about Dennis DeShane's character, I thought you might like to hear a few words directly from Dennis. A couple of years ago, Richard Searles of Solon taped an interview with Dennis in the Maine State Prison. Though Richard is still working on a feature film about Dennis, I was allowed to include a short clip of that interview for this program.
And that was really an exciting time for us. We really loved doing what we did. The farm business was a lot of fun. We did greenhousing. We had a good mail order wreath business. We sold maple syrup, under our farm label. We marketed jams and honeys. We grew tons of vegetables for sale at a produce stand, and we were into a lot of different things that we both really got excited about. So life was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of hard work, but it was really a lot of fun, and I miss that. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I did not kill Sarah Cherry. They wanted to know what I knew about a missing girl, and that was the beginning of my nightmare.
As I said earlier, you are the jury in the court of public opinion. You might want to review just some of the facts presented here. Many of these facts were not seen by the jury which convicted Dennis DeShane. First, there was the DNA, the gathering of which was denied in the trial. DNA which excluded Dennis DeShane as a suspect. There was the videotape, the one that the prosecutor claimed showed Dennis DeShane confessing to the crime. After the trial was over and the tape was examined, Jim Moore found nothing even remotely resembling a confession. An important piece of evidence is the state's own. The time of death established by forensic science puts the time of Sarah Cherry's death right in the middle of DeShane's police detention or known whereabouts. The timeline chart shows that there were 6 and 8 hours before and after Sarah's time of death when DeShane could not have possibly killed her. Then there are the Detective Western notes, which were altered for no explainable reason. The state's own police report was that of the fire tracks found at the crime scene. Of those, 3 were positively excluded as a match for Deschaines, and a 4th was identified only as a consistent type. Detective Hensby's own report conflicted with his testimony that Deschaines' Toyota pickup could only have been locked with a key. If after seeing this presentation you feel that Dennis Deschaines deserves a new trial, or even if you have reasonable doubts as to the outcome 18 years ago, learn more about the case by contacting Trial and Error. Their website is www.trialanderrordennis, all one word, .org. You'll see that written down below. If you now feel that Dennis deserves another trial, please use your rights as a citizen to send a letter to your state legislators and your local newspaper. At least discuss this with your neighbors and social groups. You might even want to join Trial and Error through the web address below.